The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Commander Sarah Mitchell stepped out of her black sedan. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every stripe on her uniform through blood, sweat, and determination. The other officers called her Falcon, though none of them knew the real reason behind the nickname. They assumed it was because of her sharp eyes and quick reflexes, or perhaps her ability to spot targets from impossible distances during training exercises. Sarah's reputation preceded her wherever she went. She was the first woman to achieve certain classified milestones in naval intelligence, though the specifics of her accomplishments remained locked away in files marked with the highest security clearances. Her personnel record showed an impressive list of commendations, but it was the gaps in her service history that made her colleagues curious. There were months, sometimes entire years, where her location and activities were simply listed as classified operations. The nickname Falcon had stuck since her early days at the Naval Academy. During a particularly challenging survival training exercise in the mountains of Colorado, Sarah had demonstrated an uncanny ability to navigate using natural landmarks and bird flight patterns. When other cadets were lost and disoriented, she would point skyward and follow the hunting patterns of hawks and eagles, leading her team to safety time and again. Her instructors were impressed, but Sarah never explained how she possessed such knowledge. What they didn't know was that Sarah had grown up on a remote ranch in Montana, where her grandfather had taught her the ancient art of falconry. From the age of 7, she had worked with birds of prey, learning their behaviors, their hunting patterns, and their incredible intelligence. Her grandfather, a weathered man with hands like leather and eyes that seemed to see everything, had been one of the last traditional falconers in the region. He taught Sarah that birds of prey were not pets or tools, but partners in an ancient dance between human and nature. The old man had seen something special in his granddaughter. While other children her age were playing video games or watching television, Sarah would spend hours in the mews, the specially built housing for the falcons. She learned to read their body language, to understand their moods, and to communicate with them in ways that seemed almost supernatural to observers. Her favorite had been a red-tailed hawk named Phoenix, a bird so intelligent and responsive that visitors to the ranch often thought the creature could understand human speech. But Sarah's childhood had not been without its dark moments. When she was 14, a group of poachers had discovered her grandfather's operation. They mistakenly believed he was illegally trapping and selling protected birds. The confrontation that followed changed everything. Sarah had watched from hiding as the men threatened her grandfather, demanding access to his birds. When they refused to listen to his explanations about proper licensing and conservation efforts, things turned violent. That night, Sarah learned that her grandfather was not just a falconer, but a former military intelligence officer who had used his skills with birds for reconnaissance missions during the Cold War. The poachers were actually foreign agents seeking information about a classified program that used trained birds for surveillance along the Canadian border. Her grandfather had been protecting more than just his beloved falcons. He had been guarding national secrets. The incident resulted in her grandfather's death, though the official report listed it as a heart attack. Sarah knew better. She had seen the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for what might happen if the wrong people gained access to his knowledge and his birds. Before the authorities arrived, he had managed to whisper a single word to her: remember. After the funeral, Sarah made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She would honor her grandfather's memory by serving her country, and she would never forget the lessons he had taught her about the incredible capabilities of birds of prey. She threw herself into her studies, excelling in everything from mathematics to languages, all while maintaining her secret knowledge of falconry. At the Naval Academy, Sarah's instructors quickly recognized her exceptional abilities, though they couldn't quite pinpoint what made her different from other cadets. She seemed to have an intuitive understanding of reconnaissance and surveillance that went beyond textbook learning. Her tactical thinking was unconventional but remarkably effective. During war games and training exercises, she would often suggest strategies that seemed to come from nowhere, but proved to be exactly right. Her fellow cadets respected her, but they also sensed that she was holding something back. Sarah never spoke about her past, never mentioned her family, and never explained how she had developed such an unusual skill set. The nickname Falcon seemed to fit perfectly, and soon everyone on base was using it. Sarah neither encouraged nor discouraged the name. She simply accepted it as part of her new identity. As graduation approached, Sarah was approached by recruiters from various special operations units. Her test scores and performance evaluations had caught the attention of some very important people in the intelligence community. They offered her opportunities that most officers could only dream of, positions that would utilize her unique abilities in ways she was only beginning to understand. But Sarah had her own plans. She had spent 4 years preparing for something specific, something that would allow her to honor her grandfather's memory while serving her country in a way that no one else could. She had been researching classified programs, using her security clearance to access files that most people didn't even know existed. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Her grandfather's work with trained birds had been part of something much larger, and that program was still active. The morning she received her commission as a naval officer, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She requested assignment to a unit that officially didn't exist, a group so classified that even acknowledging its existence required special authorization. Her request was approved within hours, which told her that someone had been watching her progress very carefully. As she prepared to leave the Naval Academy behind, Sarah took one last look at the mountains in the distance. Somewhere out there, birds of prey were hunting, using skills that had been honed over millions of years of evolution. Soon, she would be joining them in a different kind of hunt, one that would test everything her grandfather had taught her about the bond between human and Falcon. 3 years after graduation, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell found herself standing in a nondescript building outside Washington, D.C. The facility had no official name, no signs, and appeared to be nothing more than a corporate office complex to anyone driving past. Inside, however, it housed one of the most unusual and highly classified programs in military history. Sarah's commanding officer, Captain James Rodriguez, was a man who spoke in measured tones and seemed to consider every word before speaking. He had been running the avian intelligence program for over a decade, though few people knew such a program existed. The AIP was the modern evolution of the work Sarah's grandfather had begun during the Cold War, using trained birds of prey for reconnaissance missions too dangerous or sensitive for human operatives. The captain had been studying Sarah's file for months before she arrived. Her performance evaluations were exceptional, but what really caught his attention were the subtle references to her unconventional problem-solving methods. Several instructors had noted her ability to think like the enemy, to anticipate movements and strategies in ways that seemed almost instinctive. When he learned about her background with falconry, everything clicked into place. Sarah's first assignment was to work with Dr. Elena Vasquez, a behavioral scientist who had been developing new training protocols for intelligence-gathering birds. Dr. Vasquez was initially skeptical about working with someone so young, but her doubts disappeared the moment she watched Sarah interact with the facility's birds. The creatures responded to her in ways that defied everything she knew about animal behavior. The program housed dozens of birds of prey, each trained for specific types of missions. There were peregrine falcons capable of carrying tiny cameras at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. Golden eagles strong enough to transport more sophisticated equipment over longer distances. Red-tailed hawks with the patience to maintain surveillance for hours without moving. Each bird was a living, breathing intelligence asset worth more than most military vehicles. What made Sarah special was not just her ability to work with the birds, but her capacity to think like them. During her first week at the facility, she identified a problem that had been plaguing the program for months. Several of the falcons had been showing signs of stress and were refusing to complete their missions. Previous handlers had tried everything from diet changes to medication, but nothing worked. Sarah spent an entire afternoon observing the birds in their housing areas. She noticed subtle signs that others had missed: the way certain falcons positioned themselves in their enclosures, the direction they faced when resting, the times of day they seemed most alert. The problem, she realized, was not medical or psychological. It was environmental. The facility's location placed the birds directly under a major flight path for commercial aircraft. The constant noise and vibration were disrupting their natural rhythms. Her solution was elegant and effective. Working with the facility's engineers, she designed new housing areas that used specialized sound dampening and vibration isolation. Within a week, the problematic birds were back to their normal behavior patterns and mission readiness. Captain Rodriguez began to understand why Sarah's grandfather had been so valuable to the program's early development. But Sarah's real test came during her first operational deployment. Intelligence had identified a terrorist cell operating out of a compound in a mountainous region where traditional surveillance was impossible. Satellite imagery was blocked by cloud cover most days, and human reconnaissance was too risky due to the terrain and hostile forces in the area. The mission required real-time intelligence about the number of occupants, their movement patterns, and the location of any weapons or communication equipment. Sarah was assigned to work with a golden eagle named Zeus, a magnificent bird with a wingspan of over 7 feet and intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. Zeus had been with the program longer than any other bird and had completed more successful missions than some human operatives. But he was also notoriously difficult to work with, having bonded with only one previous handler who had retired the year before. The initial attempts to pair Sarah with Zeus were not promising. The eagle seemed to regard her with suspicion, refusing to respond to basic commands and showing signs of aggression when she approached. Other handlers at the facility began to wonder if Sarah's reputation had been exaggerated. Dr. Vasquez suggested that perhaps Zeus needed more time to adjust, or that Sarah should work with a different bird, but Sarah understood what the others missed. Zeus was not being difficult. He was testing her. Like all intelligent predators, he needed to establish trust and hierarchy before he would accept her as a partner. Sarah began spending hours near his enclosure, not trying to interact, just being present. She would bring her paperwork and sit nearby while he observed her. Slowly, the eagle began to show curiosity rather than hostility. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Sarah was reviewing mission plans when she noticed Zeus watching something outside his enclosure with intense focus. Following his gaze, she spotted a wild hawk circling the facility. Without thinking, she began making soft clicking sounds with her tongue, the same calls her grandfather had taught her years ago. Zeus immediately turned his attention to her, tilting his head in what seemed like recognition. From that moment, the partnership clicked. Zeus began responding to Sarah's commands, but more importantly, he began anticipating her needs. During training flights, he would adjust his patterns based on subtle changes in her body language. When she was pleased with his performance, he would return to her glove with what could only be described as pride. When she was concerned about something, he would remain close as if offering protection. Their first mission together was scheduled for the following month. Sarah spent every available hour working with Zeus, fine-tuning their communication and building the trust that would be essential in hostile territory. She also began studying everything she could about the target area, learning about local wildlife, weather patterns, and geographical features that might affect their mission. The other members of her team were impressed by her dedication, but they also noticed something unusual about her preparation methods. While they focused on equipment checks and communication protocols, Sarah seemed more concerned with understanding the natural environment where they would be operating. She studied bird migration patterns, local predator behavior, and even the types of insects and small mammals that Zeus might encounter. Captain Rodriguez watched Sarah's progress with growing confidence. He had worked with many talented officers over the years, but none who seemed to understand the true nature of the human-bird partnership required for these missions. Sarah was not just training Zeus, she was becoming part of his world, learning to see through his eyes and think with his instincts. As the mission date approached, Sarah felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that had characterized her grandfather's stories about his wartime operations. She was about to put everything she had learned to the ultimate test, using skills passed down through generations of her family to serve her country in ways that few people could imagine. The question was whether Zeus would trust her enough to follow her into danger, and whether she had truly inherited her grandfather's gift for working with these magnificent creatures. The mission began before dawn on a cold Tuesday in November. Sarah and her team were transported by helicopter to a forward operating base, nestled in a valley 60 miles from their target. The terrorist compound sat high on a ridge, surrounded by dense forest and protected by natural barriers that made conventional surveillance nearly impossible. Weather reports indicated intermittent cloud cover, which would provide concealment for Zeus but also make communication more challenging. Sarah had spent the previous evening in meditation, a practice her grandfather had taught her to calm her mind before working with the birds. She needed to be completely focused, free from the anxiety and excitement that could interfere with the subtle communication required for the mission. Zeus seemed to sense her preparation, remaining calm and alert in his specialized transport cage. The team leader, Major Scott Harrison, was a Navy SEAL with 15 years of special operations experience. He had initially been skeptical about working with what he called the Bird Lady, but Sarah's reputation and the mission's requirements had convinced his superiors that the avian intelligence program offered the only viable solution to their intelligence needs. Still, he made it clear that he expected professional results, not some exotic demonstration. Dr. Vasquez had accompanied the team to monitor Zeus's biometric data during the mission. Tiny sensors attached to the eagle's legs would transmit information about his stress levels, physical condition, and location back to their command post. This data would help Sarah understand how Zeus was responding to the mission environment and allow her to adjust her commands accordingly. As the sun rose, Sarah began her pre-flight routine with Zeus. She checked his equipment carefully, ensuring that the miniature camera and transmitter were properly secured without interfering with his flight capabilities. The technology was remarkable. Cameras no larger than a button that could capture high-definition video, and transmitters that could send real-time footage back to the team's monitoring station. Zeus stood calmly on Sarah's glove as she made final adjustments to his gear. The eagle's golden eyes surveyed the landscape with the intensity of a predator evaluating hunting territory. Sarah could feel his readiness, the coiled energy that would soon carry him into the sky at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour. She spoke to him in soft tones, using a mixture of English words and the subtle clicking sounds that had become their private language. The release was perfect. Zeus launched from Sarah's glove with powerful wing beats, climbing rapidly toward the ridge where the terrorist compound was located. Sarah watched through binoculars as he became a distant speck against the morning sky, then turned her attention to the monitoring equipment that would keep her connected to her partner throughout the mission. The first challenge came sooner than expected. As Zeus approached the target area, sensors detected a significant increase in his stress levels. Through the tiny camera, Sarah could see what was causing his distress. Another bird of prey was already hunting in the area. A wild golden eagle, probably a female based on her size, was circling the same ridge where Zeus needed to conduct surveillance. For most handlers, this would have been a mission-ending complication. Wild birds of prey are fiercely territorial, and a confrontation between Zeus and the resident eagle could result in injury to both birds or force Zeus to abandon the mission area entirely. But Sarah understood eagle behavior better than anyone else on the team. She began transmitting specific audio signals to Zeus, calls that would identify him as non-threatening to the wild bird. Major Harrison watched nervously as the two eagles circled each other at a distance. Through Zeus's camera, they could see the compound below. But the proximity of the wild bird made detailed surveillance impossible. Sarah closed her eyes and seemed to enter a state of deep concentration. For several minutes, she transmitted a series of complex audio signals, some audible to the human ear, others at frequencies only the eagles could hear. Incredibly, the strategy worked. The wild eagle gradually moved away from the compound area, apparently accepting Zeus as a temporary visitor rather than a territorial threat. Dr. Vasquez was amazed by the interaction, making rapid notes about Sarah's techniques for future study. Zeus was now free to begin his surveillance mission, and Sarah guided him into position above the target. The intelligence gathered during the next 2 hours exceeded all expectations. Zeus's camera revealed not only the number and movement patterns of the terrorists, but also the location of weapons caches, communication equipment, and what appeared to be a laboratory for manufacturing explosives. The eagle's ability to hover motionless for extended periods allowed the team to observe conversations and activities that would have been impossible to monitor through conventional means. But the mission's most crucial discovery came when Zeus spotted something that human analysts had missed. Hidden beneath camouflage netting on the far side of the compound was a helicopter landing pad with recent signs of use. Fuel containers and tire tracks indicated that aircraft had been visiting the site regularly, suggesting that the terrorist cell was more sophisticated and better connected than intelligence estimates had indicated. Sarah maintained constant communication with Zeus throughout the mission, monitoring his stress levels and energy reserves. Eagles have tremendous endurance, but the high-altitude flying and extended surveillance were demanding. She could sense his fatigue through subtle changes in his flight patterns, and began planning his return to the base camp. The extraction proved to be the mission's most dangerous moment. As Zeus began his flight back to the team's position, Dr. Vasquez detected multiple aircraft approaching the area. Military jets were conducting what appeared to be a routine patrol, but their presence created a potential disaster. If Zeus was spotted by the pilots, his unusual behavior and equipment might compromise the entire operation. Sarah had seconds to make a decision. She could recall Zeus immediately, but that would require him to fly directly through the path of the approaching aircraft. Alternatively, she could guide him to temporary cover and wait for the jets to pass, but that would drain his remaining energy reserves and potentially leave him stranded in hostile territory. Drawing on everything her grandfather had taught her about predator behavior, Sarah chose a third option. She guided Zeus into a steep dive, directing him to mimic the hunting pattern of wild eagles in the area. To the jet pilots, he would appear to be nothing more than a local bird pursuing prey. The strategy required perfect timing and absolute trust between Sarah and Zeus. The deception worked flawlessly. Zeus executed the dive with the precision of a natural predator, disappearing into the forest canopy just as the military jets passed overhead. Sarah held her breath as she waited for his signal, hoping that her partner had enough strength remaining for the final leg of his journey back to the base camp. When Zeus finally appeared on the horizon, Sarah felt a surge of relief and pride that surprised her with its intensity. The eagle landed on her glove with the exhausted but dignified bearing of a warrior returning from battle. As she removed his equipment and checked him for injuries, Sarah realized that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer just someone who worked with birds. She had become part of an ancient partnership between human and raptor that went beyond mere training or technique. Major Harrison's attitude towards Sarah changed completely after reviewing the mission footage. The intelligence gathered by Zeus had transformed their understanding of the terrorist threat and would enable a successful strike operation within days. More importantly, Sarah had demonstrated capabilities that opened up entirely new possibilities for special operations missions. As the team prepared to return to their base, Sarah spent a few quiet moments with Zeus, offering him fresh meat and clean water while he recovered from the mission. The eagle regarded her with what seemed like gratitude, and Sarah felt the same sense of connection with him that she had experienced with Phoenix all those years ago on her grandfather's ranch. She was finally understanding the true meaning behind her nickname, and why her grandfather had chosen to dedicate his life to these magnificent creatures. 6 months after the successful mountain mission, Sarah found herself facing her greatest challenge yet. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value terrorist leader was planning to meet with foreign weapons dealers on a remote island in the Pacific. The location was surrounded by hostile waters, protected by sophisticated radar systems, and patrolled by armed guards who would shoot down any aircraft that approached without authorization. Traditional surveillance methods were impossible. Satellites couldn't penetrate the cloud cover that shrouded the island most days, and human infiltration would be suicide. Even the Navy's most advanced submarines couldn't get close enough to provide useful intelligence. The mission would require something unprecedented in the history of special operations, a long-range reconnaissance, flight by a trained bird of prey operating completely independently. For over 12 hours, Captain Rodriguez called Sarah into his office on a gray February morning to discuss the assignment. The mission parameters were unlike anything the avian intelligence program had ever attempted. Zeus would need to fly nearly 200 miles over open ocean, conduct surveillance for several hours, then return to a moving naval vessel. The physical demands alone would push the Eagle beyond his normal capabilities, but the technical challenges were even more daunting. Dr. Vasquez had been working for weeks to develop specialized equipment for the mission. Zeus would carry an advanced communication system that would allow him to transmit intelligence in real time while maintaining radio silence to avoid detection. Solar panels integrated into his flight gear would keep the equipment powered during the extended mission. Most challenging of all, he would need to navigate using GPS coordinates programmed into a guidance system smaller than a wristwatch. Sarah spent countless hours studying weather patterns, ocean currents, and migratory bird routes in the target area. She needed to understand every factor that might affect Zeus's flight. from wind speeds at different altitudes to the behavior of seabirds that might interfere with his mission. Her preparation was so thorough that she began dreaming about the island, visualizing every detail of the terrain Zeus would encounter. The bond between Sarah and Zeus had deepened considerably since their first mission together. The eagle now responded to her commands with an almost telepathic precision, often anticipating her wishes before she expressed them. Other handlers at the facility were amazed by their partnership, but Sarah understood that their connection went beyond normal training protocols. She was channeling everything her grandfather had taught her about the ancient relationship between human and bird of prey. Training for the mission required modifications to the facility's normal procedures. Zeus needed to build up his endurance for extended flights over water, something that went against his natural instincts. Golden eagles are primarily terrestrial hunters, more comfortable over mountains and forests than open ocean. Sarah worked with Dr. Vasquez to develop a conditioning program that would gradually acclimate Zeus to maritime environments. The breakthrough came during a training flight over Chesapeake Bay. Sarah had been concerned about Zeus's reaction to flying over large bodies of water, but the eagle adapted more quickly than anyone expected. His natural intelligence allowed him to understand that the mission parameters were different from his normal hunting patterns. More importantly, his trust in Sarah gave him the confidence to operate in an environment that would normally trigger his avoidance instincts. Major Harrison had been assigned to lead the naval component of the mission. The SEAL team would position themselves on a submarine 12 miles from the target island, ready to extract Zeus and Sarah once the reconnaissance was complete. Harrison had initially questioned whether any bird could complete such a demanding mission, but Sarah's track record had earned his respect and confidence. The night before the mission, Sarah performed her usual meditation routine, but this time she included Zeus in the process. The eagle perched quietly beside her as she entered a state of deep concentration, seeming to draw calm and focus from her presence. Dr. Vasquez monitored their interaction through surveillance cameras, documenting what appeared to be an almost mystical connection between human and bird. Launch day brought perfect weather conditions, clear skies, moderate winds, and excellent visibility. The submarine USS Pennsylvania had positioned itself at the designated coordinates, and Zeus's equipment had passed all final checks. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that preceded every mission, but this time the stakes were higher than ever before. Zeus launched from the submarine's deck with powerful wing beats. Climbing steadily toward his cruising altitude of 8,000 feet, Sarah watched through binoculars until he disappeared into the morning sky, then turned her attention to the monitoring equipment that would keep her connected to her partner throughout the long day ahead. The first hours of the flight proceeded flawlessly. Zeus maintained his programmed heading with remarkable precision, adjusting for wind drift and weather changes as if he had been making such flights his entire life. His biometric data showed normal stress levels and good physical condition. Most importantly, the communication equipment was functioning perfectly, transmitting his location and status back to the submarine every 15 minutes. The real test came when Zeus reached the halfway point of his outbound journey. Flying over open ocean for hours was mentally as well as physically demanding for a bird accustomed to terrestrial hunting. Sarah began transmitting encouragement and guidance through the audio system. Using the same soft clicking sounds that had become their private language, she could sense his fatigue and uncertainty through subtle changes in his flight patterns. Dr. Vasquez was amazed by what she observed during this phase of the mission. Zeus's stress indicators should have been spiking as he flew further from familiar territory, but instead they remained stable. Sarah's constant communication was providing psychological support that kept the eagle focused and confident. The bond between them was literally carrying Zeus through an experience that should have overwhelmed his natural instincts. When the target island finally appeared on the horizon, Zeus's excitement was immediately apparent through his camera feed. After hours of flying over empty ocean, the sight of land triggered his hunting instincts. Sarah guided him into a wide circle around the island, allowing him to familiarize himself with the terrain before beginning the surveillance phase of the mission. The intelligence gathered during the next 3 hours changed everything. The military thought they knew about the terrorist network. Zeus's cameras revealed not just the expected meeting between the terrorist leader and weapons dealers, but evidence of a much larger operation. Hidden beneath the island's innocent resort facade was a sophisticated training facility where foreign fighters were learning advanced combat techniques. The most shocking discovery came when Zeus spotted familiar faces among the terrorists. Several individuals who were supposed to be in maximum security prisons were walking freely around the compound. Either there had been a massive security breach or someone in the intelligence community was feeding information to the enemy. Sarah realized that they had uncovered something far more dangerous than a simple weapons transaction. But Zeus's mission was far from over. The surveillance phase had been successful, but now he needed to return to the submarine, a journey that would test his remaining energy reserves to their limits. Sarah began calculating flight paths and wind patterns, searching for any advantage that might help her partner complete the return journey. Solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez had been monitoring weather data and noticed that a flock of migrating seabirds was following a route that would take them near the submarine's position. If Zeus could join the flock, he could use their draft and navigation abilities to conserve energy during the return flight. Sarah transmitted new instructions to Zeus, guiding him toward the approaching bird formation. The maneuver required perfect timing and considerable trust from the wild birds, who could easily reject an unfamiliar predator in their midst. But Zeus executed the approach flawlessly, slipping into the formation as if he had been migrating with these birds his entire life. The return journey took on an almost magical quality as Zeus flew alongside hundreds of seabirds, all heading toward the same general destination. His camera captured breathtaking footage of the ocean from within the migration, providing a bird's-eye view that no human had ever experienced. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched her partner complete one of the most remarkable flights in aviation history. When Zeus finally appeared on the submarine's horizon, the entire crew gathered on deck to witness his landing. The eagle touched down on Sarah's glove with the exhausted dignity of a warrior returning from an epic quest. As she removed his equipment and checked him for injuries, Sarah realized that they had accomplished something unprecedented in the history of military operations. The intelligence gathered from Zeus's island mission triggered a massive investigation that reached the highest levels of government. Sarah found herself summoned to classified briefings in Washington, where she presented her findings to officials she had only seen on television. The revelation that several supposedly imprisoned terrorists were operating freely had exposed a conspiracy that threatened national security at its core. 3 weeks after the mission, Sarah was called to an emergency meeting at the Pentagon. Admiral Rebecca Stone, the Navy's Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, was leading a joint task force investigating the security breaches Zeus had uncovered. The Admiral was a formidable woman who had risen through the ranks during an era when female officers faced significant barriers. She understood better than most what it meant to prove yourself in a male-dominated field. Admiral Stone reviewed Sarah's mission reports with the intensity of someone looking for hidden meanings in every word. The success of the island operation had attracted attention from intelligence agencies that had previously dismissed the avian intelligence program as an expensive novelty. Now everyone wanted to know how a woman and a bird had accomplished what billion-dollar satellite systems and elite human operatives had failed to achieve. The investigation revealed that the security breaches were part of a sophisticated enemy operation that had been years in development. Foreign intelligence services had been systematically identifying and corrupting officials within the American defense establishment, creating a network of double agents who could provide real-time information about military operations. The island facility was just one node in a much larger web of deception. Sarah's role in exposing the conspiracy had made her a target. Intelligence reports indicated that hostile forces were actively seeking information about her identity and capabilities. The success of her bird-based reconnaissance missions had apparently surprised enemy analysts, who were scrambling to understand how their supposedly secure operations had been compromised by what they initially dismissed as animal surveillance. Captain Rodriguez assigned a security detail to protect Sarah, but she found the constant presence of armed guards more stressful than the threat they were meant to address. The restrictions on her movement made it difficult to maintain her training routine with Zeus and the other birds in the program. She began to feel like a prisoner of her own success, trapped by the very abilities that had made her valuable to the military. The situation became more complicated when Sarah learned that her grandfather's death had not been the accident she had always believed. Files declassified as part of the conspiracy investigation revealed that the poachers who had threatened him were actually foreign agents seeking information about the early bird reconnaissance programs. Her grandfather had died protecting secrets that were still vital to national security, and now Sarah was carrying on his work under similar threats. Dr. Vasquez noticed changes in Sarah's behavior during this period. The young officer was becoming increasingly isolated, spending more time with the birds and less time interacting with her human colleagues. The stress of constant security threats was affecting her ability to maintain the calm, focused mindset required for working with birds of prey. Zeus himself seemed to sense Sarah's anxiety, becoming more protective and aggressive toward strangers. The turning point came when Sarah received an unexpected visitor at the facility. Maria Santos was a woman in her 70s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that reminded Sarah of her grandfather. She introduced herself as a former CIA operative who had worked with Sarah's grandfather during the original bird reconnaissance programs. She had requested permission to meet Sarah after learning about her recent missions and the threats she was facing. Maria's stories about Sarah's grandfather revealed a side of the man she had never known. During the Cold War, he had been one of a handful of specialists who used trained birds of prey to gather intelligence behind enemy lines. His work had helped prevent several potential conflicts and had saved countless lives by providing early warning of hostile activities. More importantly, he had developed training techniques that formed the foundation of the modern avian intelligence program, but Maria also warned Sarah about the psychological costs of working in such a specialized and secretive field. The isolation, the constant danger, and the responsibility of handling classified information had driven several operatives to nervous breakdowns or worse. Sarah's grandfather had survived by maintaining his connection to the natural world and the birds he worked with, but even he had paid a heavy price for his service. The conversation with Maria helped Sarah understand why she felt so connected to Zeus and the other birds in the program. She was not just following in her grandfather's footsteps. She was continuing a family tradition that went back generations. The knowledge that had been passed down to her was more than just training techniques. It was a way of understanding the world that few humans ever experienced. Maria offered Sarah something that changed her perspective on everything. Hidden in her grandfather's papers, which had been sealed by the government after his death, was a detailed journal describing his techniques for communicating with birds of prey. The methods went far beyond conventional training, incorporating elements of intuition and empathy that bordered on the mystical. Reading her grandfather's words, Sarah realized that she had been unconsciously following his teachings without even knowing they existed. The journal also contained disturbing information about the foreign agents who had killed her grandfather. The same organization was still active, now using more sophisticated methods to penetrate American intelligence operations. They had been watching Sarah's career with increasing interest, and her recent successes had marked her as a high-priority target. The journal warned that they would eventually attempt to capture or eliminate her, just as they had done with her grandfather. Armed with this new knowledge, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone around her. Instead of requesting additional security or a transfer to a safer assignment, she proposed an audacious plan to use herself as bait to draw out the enemy agents. If they wanted to capture someone with knowledge of bird reconnaissance techniques, she would give them the opportunity while leading them into a carefully prepared trap. Admiral Stone initially rejected the proposal as too dangerous, but Sarah's arguments were compelling. The enemy's interest in her represented an opportunity to identify and eliminate a threat that had been operating in the shadows for decades. More importantly, Sarah had unique capabilities that made her the only person who could carry out such a mission successfully. The plan required Sarah to appear vulnerable while actually being protected by an invisible network of surveillance and support. Zeus would play a crucial role, using his ability to scout potential threats from the air while appearing to be conducting routine training flights. Other birds from the program would create overlapping coverage, providing early warning of any hostile approach. Dr. Vasquez was horrified by the proposal, arguing that it placed both Sarah and Zeus in unnecessary danger. But Sarah's determination was unwavering. She had read her grandfather's journal cover to cover, absorbing not just his techniques but his philosophy about the bond between human and bird. She understood now that her connection with Zeus was not just professional. It was spiritual, representing a partnership that could accomplish things neither human nor bird could achieve alone. The planning phase took 6 weeks. With input from multiple intelligence agencies and special operations units, the deception had to be perfect. Sarah needed to appear isolated and vulnerable, while actually being protected by one of the most sophisticated surveillance networks ever assembled. Zeus and the other program birds would provide aerial reconnaissance, while human operatives would maintain hidden positions. Throughout the operational area, Sarah's cover story was that she had been suspended from the avian intelligence program pending an investigation into security breaches. She would be staying at a remote safe house while the review was conducted, with only minimal security presence. In reality, the facility was surrounded by layers of protection that remained invisible to casual observation. Every approach route was monitored. Every potential hiding place was under surveillance. The waiting was the hardest part. Sarah maintained her normal routine with Zeus, but both of them could sense the underlying tension. The eagle became increasingly protective, refusing to fly more than a few hundred yards from Sarah's position, and showing signs of aggression toward anyone he didn't recognize. His behavior was so pronounced that Dr. Vasquez wondered if he somehow understood the danger they were facing. The enemy made their move on a foggy Thursday morning in late spring. Sarah was conducting a routine training session with Zeus when she noticed subtle changes in his behavior. The eagle's head movements became more focused, his posture more alert. Through their private communication system, he was telling her that something was wrong, that unfamiliar presences were approaching through the forest surrounding the facility. Sarah continued the training session as if nothing had changed, but she began transmitting coded signals to her hidden support team. Zeus climbed to a higher altitude, providing better surveillance coverage while appearing to perform normal flight maneuvers. Through his camera, Sarah could see armed figures moving through the trees approaching the facility with military precision. The attack began with an attempt to disable the facility's communication systems. The enemy had done their homework, identifying what they believed were the critical vulnerabilities in Sarah's security arrangements. What they didn't know was that the real communication network was completely separate from the obvious systems they had targeted. Zeus and the other birds continued transmitting intelligence even as the conventional equipment went offline. Sarah found herself facing 3 highly trained operatives who had infiltrated the facility while she was distracted by the training session. They moved with the efficiency of professionals, using non-lethal weapons that would allow them to capture her alive. Their goal was clearly to extract her for interrogation, hoping to learn the secrets of the bird reconnaissance program that had proved so effective against their operations. But they had underestimated both Sarah and her feathered partner. As the operatives closed in, Zeus dove from his position high above the facility, striking the lead attacker with the precision of a guided missile. Golden eagles are among the most powerful birds of prey in North America, with talons capable of exerting over 750 pounds of pressure per square inch. The operative was disabled instantly, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. Sarah used the confusion to escape the immediate trap, but she was still outnumbered and outgunned. The remaining operatives adapted quickly to the bird attack, using their training to counter Zeus's diving strikes. One of them managed to wound the eagle with a specialized net launcher, trapping him temporarily and removing his ability to provide aerial support. The situation became desperate until Sarah remembered a technique from her grandfather's journal that she had never attempted before. Using a series of high-pitched calls that carried for miles through the forest, she summoned every bird of prey in the area to her aid. Wild hawks, falcons, and eagles responded to her calls, apparently recognizing some ancient signal that transcended species boundaries. The sight of dozens of raptors converging on the facility created chaos among the enemy operatives. They had trained for human opponents and conventional weapons, but nothing had prepared them for coordinated attacks by wild birds of prey. The aerial assault provided cover for Sarah's support team to move in and capture the surviving attackers. In the aftermath of the battle, Sarah found Zeus tangled in the capture net but otherwise unharmed. As she freed him, the eagle pressed his head against her hand in what seemed like gratitude and relief. Their partnership had been tested under the most extreme conditions possible, and it had proved unbreakable. Around them, The wild birds that had answered Sarah's call circled overhead before gradually dispersing back into the forest. Admiral Stone arrived at the facility within hours of the attack, bringing with her a team of specialists to debrief the captured operatives and analyze the intelligence gathered during the operation. The success of Sarah's plan had exceeded all expectations, providing crucial information about enemy capabilities while eliminating a significant threat to national security. More importantly, it had validated the avian intelligence program in ways that no routine mission ever could. 6 months after the attack on the safe house, Commander Sarah Mitchell stood before a joint session of the Senate Intelligence Committee, preparing to testify about the avian intelligence program. The room was filled with senators, military officials, and intelligence professionals who had gathered to hear firsthand about the capabilities she and Zeus had demonstrated. The success of recent operations had transformed the program from a classified experiment into a cornerstone of American national security strategy. The questions came from all directions, some skeptical, others amazed by what the birds had accomplished. Senator Patricia Williams from Montana seemed particularly interested in the psychological aspects of working with birds of prey. She had grown up on a ranch herself and understood the unique bond that could develop between humans and wild animals. Her questions revealed a deeper understanding of what Sarah had achieved than most of the military officials possessed. Dr. Vasquez sat in the gallery, watching proudly as Sarah fielded complex technical questions with confidence and precision. The young commander had grown considerably since their first meeting, developing into one of the most knowledgeable experts on avian intelligence in the world. More importantly, she had learned to articulate the spiritual and emotional aspects of her work in ways that helped others understand the true nature of human-bird partnerships. Zeus was not present at the hearing, but his achievements were documented in classified footage that committee members viewed in private sessions. The footage showed missions that seemed impossible: an eagle flying hundreds of miles over open ocean, conducting surveillance in hostile territory, and working with wild birds to defend his human partner. Several senators emerged from these briefings visibly shaken by what they had witnessed. The most significant revelation of Sarah's testimony concerned the discovery of her grandfather's journal and its connection to historical intelligence operations. The techniques described in the journal represented knowledge that had been developed over generations, refined through trial and error by specialists who understood that birds of prey possessed capabilities that no human technology could replicate. This knowledge was now being passed to a new generation of operatives who would carry on the work. Captain Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral following the success of the program, and he used his new position to expand operations significantly. Training facilities were established at multiple locations, each designed to work with different species of birds adapted to specific operational environments. Desert-based programs used Harris hawks and red-tailed hawks, while coastal operations employed peregrine falcons and ospreys. Mountain units worked with golden eagles like Zeus, the apex predators of high-altitude environments. The expansion created opportunities for Sarah to train other handlers, passing on not just the technical skills but the deeper understanding that made true partnership possible. She discovered that teaching others helped her appreciate how unique her own abilities were. Most handlers could learn to work effectively with birds, but few possessed the intuitive connection that allowed them to communicate across species boundaries. Her first student was Lieutenant Marcus Chen, a young officer with a background in wildlife biology, who had requested assignment to the program after hearing about its successes. Marcus was intelligent and dedicated, but he struggled with the psychological aspects of bird handling. He approached the work too analytically, trying to understand every interaction through scientific principles rather than trusting his instincts. Sarah's breakthrough with Marcus came during a training session with a young peregrine falcon named Artemis. The bird was responding poorly to Marcus's commands, showing signs of stress and confusion that indicated a fundamental communication failure. Sarah had Marcus sit quietly and simply observe Artemis for an hour, noting every detail of the bird's behavior and body language. Gradually, Marcus began to understand that effective communication with birds of prey required abandoning human concepts of logic and control. The birds responded to emotional states, energy levels, and subtle cues that operated below the level of conscious thought. Once Marcus learned to quiet his analytical mind and trust his intuitive responses, His partnership with Artemis improved dramatically. The program's success attracted attention from international allies who wanted to develop similar capabilities. Sarah found herself traveling to training facilities in Australia, working with wedge-tailed eagles in the outback, and to Scotland, where she learned to work with sea eagles along the rugged coastline. Each environment presented unique challenges and opportunities, expanding her understanding of how different species could be integrated into intelligence operations. But the international work also revealed disturbing intelligence about enemy countermeasures. Foreign agencies had been studying the American bird program and developing technologies designed to detect and neutralize avian surveillance. Electronic jamming devices could disrupt communication between handlers and their birds, while specialized radar systems could track individual birds and identify those carrying surveillance equipment. The technological arms race led to the development of more sophisticated equipment and training techniques. Birds learned to operate in electronic warfare environments, using natural navigation methods when GPS systems were jammed. New communication systems used frequencies and encoding methods that mimicked natural bird calls, making them nearly impossible for enemy forces to detect or intercept. Sarah's most challenging assignment came when she was asked to develop techniques for working in urban environments. Cities presented unique difficulties for birds of prey, with electromagnetic interference, air pollution, and human activity that could overwhelm even the most well-trained animals. The solution required partnering with wildlife rehabilitation centers and urban falconry programs to understand how birds adapted to metropolitan environments. The urban program achieved its first major success during a counter-terrorism operation in a major American city. Intelligence indicated that foreign agents were planning an attack during a large public event, but conventional surveillance methods were ineffective due to crowd density and security restrictions. Sarah and Zeus conducted reconnaissance from rooftops and high-rise buildings, providing real-time intelligence that allowed security forces to identify and neutralize the threat before any attack could occur. The mission demonstrated that the avian intelligence program had evolved beyond its original reconnaissance focus into a comprehensive national security capability. Birds could operate in environments and situations where human agents or technological systems would be detected immediately. Their natural behaviors provided perfect camouflage, while their intelligence and training allowed them to gather information that could save lives and protect national interests. As Sarah reflected on her journey from the Naval Academy to her current position, she realized that her grandfather's legacy had grown far beyond what he could have imagined. The techniques he had developed during the Cold War had evolved into a sophisticated program that was helping to protect the country from 21st-century threats. More importantly, the bond between human and bird that he had cherished was being preserved and strengthened for future generations. Zeus, now a veteran of dozens of missions, had become something of a legend within the intelligence community. Other handlers spoke of him with the reverence usually reserved for human heroes, recognizing that his achievements had opened doors for an entirely new approach to military operations. Sarah knew that their partnership represented something rare and special, a connection between species that transcended the boundaries of conventional training. On quiet evenings at the facility, Sarah would sit with Zeus and remember her grandfather's words about the ancient bond between human and raptor. She understood now that she had inherited more than just knowledge and techniques. She had received a responsibility to preserve and protect a relationship that connected her to thousands of years of human history. The nickname Falcon had taken on deeper meaning, representing not just her abilities but her role as guardian of an ancient tradition that was more vital than ever in the modern world. The future of the program looked brighter than ever, with new technologies enhancing rather than replacing the natural capabilities of birds and their human partners. Sarah knew that challenges lay ahead, as enemies developed new countermeasures and operational requirements continued to evolve. But she also knew that the fundamental truth her grandfather had discovered would remain constant. The partnership between human intelligence and natural instinct could accomplish things that neither could achieve alone. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, the ancient art of falconry had found new purpose as a cornerstone of national defense, proving that some bonds between species were too powerful and too valuable to ever become obsolete.